Nothing now stood between the retreating Republican Guard and destruction. A radio message told Saddam Hussein of the defeat.
He thought that his downfall was imminent. He asked me straight out, "Do you think that the Allies will come as far as Baghdad?" He was quite desperate and frightened.
Having destroyed the rear guard, 7 Corps pushed on towards the sea. Meanwhile, the American 18th Corps advanced to cut off the remaining Iraqi resistance. "60 helicopters from the 101st Airborne Division leapfrogged 100 miles ahead, deep into the Iraqi desert. The troops had orders to build an airbase from which Apache helicopter gunships could attack the retreating Republican Guard until the American tanks closed in. Within 2 hours, the base was operational. Waves of Apaches arrived and refueled. Then they headed north to hunt for the enemy. Doug Gabram led one flight of 4 Apaches.
We took off due north as fast as we could go, probably 30 feet off the ground, 120 knots. The terrain changed. We started flying over marshes.
This is what Gabram could see through his gun camera. He found the retreating forces on a causeway built across the marshes.
We saw people, dismounted infantry. I'd see the AK-47 raised with the white flag on it. Initially, I didn't fire. My chalk 2 or 3 would say, "Hey, the guy's shooting at us. You know, they're shooting at us with white flags on the end of their barrels." And my philosophy changed, and that I'm not going to take any chances. So when I see troops, I'm going to fire.
I got people running on the road there. I only count 3 airplanes. Where's the other one? Stay up the road. Stay ready. Roger that. The second fire out your left door right now. This is Bearcat 4-4, Bearcat 1-6.
Hundreds of soldiers were lying in the reeds along the edges of the causeway.
And scratch 1, BMP.
As Gabram continued down the causeway, an F-16 pilot who'd been shot down and was parachuting to the ground put out an emergency broadcast. The pilot managed to land safely and a rescue mission set off. Dr. Rhonda Cornum was one of the crew.
This was an opportunity to really go save somebody, we thought, and we took 2 Apaches and my Black Hawk and just started going there. Right within a couple kilometers of where this guy supposedly was, and we're still seeing American troops, so we thought, man, it's going to be not difficult. And then all of a sudden, like maybe a minute later, we are in the middle of a crossfire, just the worst anti-aircraft guns we'd ever had. We'd gotten shot at before, but it was clear that these guys were waiting for us. You could feel the aircraft shudder. Then I think that's when the tail boom kind of separated from the rest of the aircraft. And then everything went black. It was some time later, and all of a sudden I just realized I was lying down, and I thought I was dead. It was the most weird feeling because nothing hurt and I couldn't hear anything, and it was very peaceful. And I thought, well, I must be dead. I looked up and I saw 5 Iraqi guys with their rifles pointed at me. So then I knew I wasn't dead, and I knew I was captured. Then one of them reached down, grabbed me by the arm, and stood me up. And that's when he separated my already broken right arm. And then I knew I was pretty badly hurt and clearly not dead. So they took off my flight helmet, and all this long below shoulder length brown hair came out. And until then, I'm sure they just thought I was a skinny guy. But all of a sudden they realized, oh my goodness, this is a girl. I was just leaning back on the seat, and all of a sudden I feel this guy sitting next to me who puts his hand on my face and starts to kiss me. And I thought, well, how bizarre. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I really thought surely he can do better. I I mean, I've got one eye I got a cut above my eye and it's soaked with blood, and I'm sure I don't smell very good. And I'm thinking, how can he possibly want to do this? And then he unzipped my flight suit and started fondling me, and I thought, I can't believe it. A lot of people make a big deal about getting molested, and I'm sure it's a big deal. But in the hierarchy of things that were going wrong, that was pretty low on my list.
All afternoon, waves of gunships attacked the retreating Iraqi troops.
We're going to back away from them a little bit. There seem to be no threat at all. Okay, 47. Watch them. Okay, roger that. They're just,
In the confusion of battle, no one could be sure how many units were retreating undetected. But the American forces intended to cut them off and trap them all in a ring of Allied tanks.
Shit, I don't know what the hell to do with these guys. Okay, they're leaving.
More than 70,000 Iraqis had surrendered.
It doesn't seem like this third war. I just feel sorry for them, and it doesn't seem like they want to fight.
If the Allies were going to close the ring on the Republican Guard, the fighting would have to continue. But in Washington, Colin Powell was worried that further slaughter would stain the military's reputation.
You don't do unnecessary killing if it can be avoided. At some point, you decide you've accomplished your objectives and you stop. We owned Kuwait City. The question was, how much additional destruction do we want to inflict upon the Iraqi army that was in the Kuwait theater?
On the battlefield, Apache gunships designed to destroy tank columns were hunting down individual soldiers. Colin Powell had once said of the Iraqi army, "First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it." The Iraqis were not completely cut off, but Powell decided there had been enough killing. He called Norman Schwarzkopf. It was 7 a.m. in Washington, 3 p.m. in the desert.
Colin said to me, "What are your plans?" My response to him was, "We plan to continue to execute the operation and continue to drive towards the sea, east towards the sea." And he then said to me, "How long would that take you?" And my response to him was, it will take until the end of tomorrow. So we could cease fire tomorrow evening at dark, and we would have completely accomplished the plan.
Sitting in the Pentagon, Powell knew this meant another day of killing. The president had to make a decision.
After talking to Schwarzkopf, I went over to the White House. I took the president through the situation on the ground. I pointed out that we were starting to see some scenes that were unpleasant. And we were in the window of calling an end to it so as that there was not unnecessary additional loss of life on the part of American and coalition forces or on the part of Iraqi youngsters.
Colin said, we basically have done it. We have destroyed the Republican Guard. We have expelled them from Kuwait. We have essentially completed our objectives, and I believe we are just a few hours from completing that effort.
And I would expect that within the next 24 hours, I would be bringing you a recommendation with respect to the cessation of hostilities. The president then said, well, if that's the case, if we're within the window, why not end it now?
Colin Powell called me. He said, I'm at the White House. We've discussed ending the war. Could you execute a ceasefire if it was declared effective midnight Washington time tonight? I told him that I could live with that. Quite frankly, if we went on another day, we were going to kill some more of our people, and we had already won an overwhelming victory with a minimum of casualties, and that was good enough for me.
At 5:57 p.m., the president told Powell to stop the war. It's the thing to do, he said.
It was a decision that as best I can recall, there was absolutely no dissent from on the part of any of the president's advisors.
Deep down, I wondered if we really had done quite enough, but I did not dissent from the decision. Did not argue that we should go another day.
In the war room, there'd been no thought of ceasefire, only of completing the plan and completely trapping the Iraqis the next day.
General Schwarzkopf walked into the war room, and he said, "We are going to have a ceasefire." Well, I thought that he was jesting, so I said, "That's bullshit." So he says, "No, I'm serious. We will have a ceasefire." So I said, "We have not accomplished our mission. Why is it that we're going to stop what we set out to do and stop the war?" And General Schwarzkopf says, "Cal, God damn it, the President of the United States has made a decision to stop this war."
Ladies and gentlemen, General Schwarzkopf.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
A few hours before the president made his decision, Schwarzkopf had summed up the state of the war before a worldwide television audience in a bravura performance that became known as the mother of all briefings.
Why we were doing it. But we have rendered completely ineffective over 29 Iraqi divisions, and the gates are closed. There is no way out of here. There is no way out of here, and the enemy is fighting us in this location right here.
Schwarzkopf's orders were to destroy the Republican Guard, not neutralize them, destroy them. And when he got up in his briefing, the mother of all briefings, he said the gate is closed, meaning that our forces had cut them off and that they were helpless, lying helpless in front of us.
Yeah.
You said the gate was closed. Have you got ground forces blocking the roads to Basra?
No.
Now, is there any way that they can get out that way?
No. That's why the gate's closed. Right here, yeah.
Of course, that wasn't true at all. The gate was not closed, and it was still wide open at Basra, and the Iraqis were fleeing, and they had brought their corps headquarters across the Euphrates, and then they were bringing the rest of the divisions across, and ended up with about 2/3 of the Republican Guard units escaping with about 50% of their equipment. So he never carried out the goal that he had set for himself in his own mission orders.
Why did you draw back at this moment?
Well, I don't consider it a drawing back. From the information that I had in my headquarters, we had inflicted tremendous damage on the Republican Guard. We had bombed them for over 30 days straight. We had attacked them and fought them. We had destroyed many, many, many pieces of equipment. We had attacked them from the air during the ground campaign and inflicted great damage on them. So I already felt that there were several divisions of the Republican Guard, it was reported to me, that had been destroyed. It wasn't 100% destruction, but had we been allowed to go on for one more day, it would not have been 100% destruction then.
Just hours before the ceasefire went into effect, the British Army charged out of the desert towards the road running from Kuwait City north to Iraq.
As we pulled over the top of the ridge, in front of us was the highway. We'd seen dead bodies before, but it was in the next few hours that once you were actually in and among it for the first time, walking around, clearing your positions or whatever, that's when it started, they actually came across of how much carnage there was there.
None of the pictures of the Highway of Death had yet appeared on television, but these were the scenes the men in the White House had anticipated as they weighed the political risks of continuing the war. Hundreds had died here of an estimated 25,000 Iraqis killed in the war. As many as 12,000 soldiers had died during the 6 weeks of the air war, along with 2,300 non-combatant civilians. And another 10,000 Iraqi soldiers were killed during the 4 days of the ground war.
There was a lot of civilian equipment that had been stolen from Kuwait City. For me, the thing that I found most distressing was the smell of cheap perfume, this sweet, sickly smell I was ready for the smell of war, but I wasn't ready for the smell of kind of everyday life and normality. I felt there was an immense sense of evil there. I mean, I detested being there. And for 3 days that we actually sat on the highway, I hated it. And it enveloped me more and more and more.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. I am pleased to announce that at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, exactly 100 hours since ground operations commenced and 6 weeks since the start of Operation Desert Storm, all United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations.
3 hours later, the fighting stopped.
And as the word filtered down that the war, in fact, had ended, 2nd Brigade rooted around for a copy of Lee Greenwood's tape that had become the anthem of the Desert Storm operation, and they couldn't find Lee Greenwood. All they could find was James Brown, I Feel Good, which was an anthem from a different war of a different kind. 1968, I think it came out. So they plugged James Brown into this truck with big speakers on it. And you heard James Brown, I Feel Good, blaring all over the desert as their hymn of thanksgiving that the war was finally over.
I phoned Saddam and told him that Bush had agreed to this ceasefire. He felt himself to be a great hero. He started to say, we won. We won. His morale rose from 0 to 100.
Each day of war had left Saddam's regime more vulnerable to overthrow. Now the humiliation was over. The greatest fear of Allied tanks in Baghdad was gone. The Allies had stopped the war. Saddam could concentrate on surviving.
On the question of going to Baghdad, if you remember the Vietnam War, we had no international legitimacy for what we did. As a result, we, first of all, lost the battle in world public opinion. Eventually, we lost the battle at home. In the Gulf War, we had great international legitimacy in the form of 8 United Nations resolutions, every one of which said, kick Iraq out of Kuwait. Did not say one word about going into Iraq, taking Baghdad, conquering the whole country, and hanging Saddam Hussein. That's point number 1. Point number 2, had we gone on to Baghdad, I don't believe the French would have gone. And I'm quite sure that the Arab coalition would not have gone. The coalition would have ruptured, and the only people that would have gone would have been the United Kingdom and the United States of America. And oh, by the way, I think we'd still be there. We'd be like a dinosaur in a tar pit. We could not have gotten out, and we'd still be the occupying power, and we'd be paying 100% of all the costs to administer all of Iraq.
Two days after the ceasefire, a brigade of Republican Guards returning to Iraq fired upon the 24th Infantry Division. The Americans replied with overwhelming firepower. 7 months after Iraqi forces marched into Kuwait, the last battle had been fought. The conflict cost 240 coalition lives, 146 of them Americans. After the war, over 10,000 veterans would claim they were victims of a Gulf War syndrome, illnesses caused by their service. The Pentagon says there is no evidence of a syndrome, but medical studies continue. Iraq had been broken as a military threat, but Saddam had escaped with a third of his forces from Kuwait and his hold on power.
You know, to be very honest with you, I don't